We have a lot of work to do. The reason we have a lot of work isn't because things are awful in our water and wastewater systems. It's because our water systems are dynamic.
Hmm.
Mm,
We are productive, creative people in society that do a bunch of really cool things. And sometimes those things create what I'd call spillover effects. And some of those spillover effects are literally chemicals that go into our waterways. And so it's really important to have the regulatory bodies in place that ensure that when you're drinking that water, it's clean and safe.
Welcome to the Make Water Work podcast, where we dive into the people, ideas, and innovations shaping the future of water. I'm your host, Isaac Pellerin, and alongside my co-host, Megan Glover, the founder of 120 Water, we bring you insights from hundreds of incredible conversations we've had over the past 9 years with inspiring and energizing leaders in the water industry. Each week, we share those stories and conversations with entrepreneurs, community champions, and innovators who are making water work for everyone. Whether you're a water professional, a curious innovator, or simply passionate about our most precious resource, this podcast is for you. Let's get started. Thank you so much for joining this week's episode of Make Water Work podcast. We have such an incredible conversation lined up with Bruno Pigott, who's just an inspirational leader. Megan, you were sharing some ways that you've found him just incredibly inspiring, the impact that he's had. Tell me a little bit about that.
So we were both leading at the same time during COVID, Bruno as the commissioner of IDEM. And if anybody remembers that time or can open their brain or wants to remember that time, leading an organization it was exhausting, right? And I found inspiration in the way Bruno led his organization and his diligence. And he would create these very personal videos and he would find ways to continue to connect with his team, even if it was virtual. I mean, imagine going from fully present to now virtual. And I took a play out of Bruno's playbook in terms of how I wanted to show up in my organization. And so I knew he's always been a phenomenal leader, and not only leader of people, but leader in our industry. And so I'm excited for the pod to see that his leadership in action on this episode.
Yeah, he is. He's so articulate and inspiring. I remember anytime I've been at a conference, he's always been so generous in his compliments. When we would present, he would come out over to our booth and say, "Thank you so much on presenting about the lead and copper rule. You guys do a better job at communicating than the EPA." And he would just really make us feel like the impact that we were having. He would fuel us and thank you for,
Yes.
and he was very thankful for the work that we were doing. Yeah. And just always felt seen. Yeah. And so this is a great conversation. If you ever get the chance to meet Bruno in person, you should definitely take that opportunity. But we're going to bring him to you virtually in this conversation. And so let's tune in.
Well, Isaac, we have a wonderful guest joining us. I know, me too. Joining us for today's podcast. And as we teed up a little bit, welcome Bruno to the stage. It's wonderful to have you, Bruno Pigott, former IDEM commissioner, deputy assistant administrator for the EPA of water. That's a mouthful. So Bruno, I hope I kind of got something in the same sequence. and always friend and mentor and confidant here at 120 Water, which I probably value most about this guest coming on the pod. So Bruno, thank you for coming.
You're quite welcome, and it's an honor to be here. And as usual, it's a true joy. And I've been following with a great deal of excitement the work you guys are doing at 120 Water, and think you're at the cutting edge of making a difference in terms of water quality for our citizens.
Well, we appreciate that support and your perspective, and it means so much. And we like to start the pod with a question, because I've never met anybody in water that doesn't have a story. So, Bruno, would you mind sharing how water found you?
Absolutely. For the past 75 years, our family has owned a property on the shores of Lake Huron in northern Michigan, far, far from the hustle and the bustle of the big cities. I grew up surrounded by towering pine trees, vast wetlands, rolling sand dunes, and a powerful, powerful lake. On summer mornings, I would run to the beach and build sandcastles and swim in the crystal clear waters of Lake Huron. I spent afternoons fishing in cold water streams, and I marveled at the far off twinkling lights of the Mackinac Bridge in the evening under a campfire as darkness enveloped the land. And I could witness an explosion of stars in the night sky like nowhere else. I would fall asleep at night to the sounds of a foghorn from the local lighthouse, provide its reassuring guidance to the Lakers navigating these sweetwater seas. The environment was baked into my being like a golden brown suntan from a mild summer day. I carried that passion for the environment with me in all of my jobs, from the Department of Environmental Management in Indiana to most recently at EPA.
Mm.
That at its core is
Yeah.
innate to you. I
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah, that is. And that's like, it's such an incredible journey to think about where you started, where you ended up in Indiana, and then to the EPA. I would love to know what it was like to jump from working for the state of Indiana to get the call and to answer the call to go to the EPA.
Well, I had worked at the Department of Environmental Management Indiana for 21 years. It gave me a deep understanding of our environmental agency in Indiana and how each of our different program areas work at a state level. I was sensitive of the concerns that municipalities would raise about the cost of improving their infrastructure to ensure safe and clean water. And I also worked in the House of Representatives for 5 years and as an elected city council member. And each of those experiences gave me some insight that helped me when I joined EPA. But I learned an awful lot at EPA about how the process of putting rules together works and the people behind those processes. And so it was a great learning process, Isaac. It was almost like going back to grad school for another
I'll
course,
bet.
but the course is in how does the federal government administrative area work? And I learned an awful lot in that process and was taught by the best people, the people who knew the system backward and forward.
Yeah. Well, you've just now sparked another question about the importance of people. So I'm going to ask the question because the importance of people, and we know that a lot of people and jobs at the EPA are at risk or have already been eliminated. I mean, Bruno, would you what impact is that going to have on the rulemaking process, on just the executing the programs that do survive kind of the legislative agenda of this administration? Like, would you mind speaking a little bit about the importance of people and what impact that might have on the industry?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. A couple things. First of all, in terms of the people that have left for EPA, either by them out of their own desire to leave, or those people that were eliminated in various adjustments to the agency. We lost a combination of some of the youngest people in the agency, as well as some of the most senior people. So this has a couple impacts in terms of the people. The young folks that join come with the freshest of job skills and come with a great deal of background. I've never been in a place that has so many PhDs in the organization as EPA. And a lot of those people that came with new expertise have left. And as a result, the stable, if you will, of new talent that would stick around in other situations just won't be there in the future. So I could see as people who remain age and retire from the agency, it'll be harder for the agency to have a readily available talent pool to replace those who are leaving. So that's one outcome. And I think the people, as you said, are the biggest part of the place. I was just talking to some of my former colleagues last night, and one of the things we all agreed on is that it's the people that make the difference. We had a very talented crew of experienced people. There are still really good people at EPA, and those people will lead the agency and do a great job. It's just harder. I know there are several changes under consideration. The administration eliminated the environmental justice office. They are also considering eliminating the Office of Research and Development. The Office of Research and Development has 10 offices throughout the country. And one of those offices in Cincinnati,
Yeah.
Ohio,
Yeah.
deals with lead issues. So it's really relevant to our conversation and your work.
Yeah.
The researchers there do amazing work investigating and determining for communities across the country whether certain lead lines, for example, are lead, and then figuring out what is the effect of a lead service line on a specific home. So a loss of a research institution like that would have long-lasting impacts. It is, I think, one of the reasons that EPA is our premier environmental organization in the country. It's because they not only have the regulatory chops, not only do they fund programs, but also they have research expertise that is broad and probably wider than any other institution, not only in the U.S., but also in the world. I can't think of another one that has it. So losing those people would definitely have a huge impact on the agency. I will say also, states around the nation depend upon EPA's research experience. While I appreciate the work of all the people at the Indiana Department of Environmental Management and other state agencies, they don't have a research arm
Right.
that's attached to the state
Right.
agency. So they depend on and work with the Office of Research and Development. That eliminating that would be, I think, a mistake for the organization in the long run.
I think that's a fascinating tie through.
There is, and there's so much that goes into implementing at the state level federal regulations, new federal regulations as things shift. How do you get adoption by the states who are responsible for getting adoption by the utilities? I would love to also kind of dig into some of your accomplishments when you were at EPA, some of the things that you worked on, whether it was the lead and copper rule revisions, consumer conference reports, PFAS, and then where you see some of those things going and what work we still have to do.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do. The reason we have a lot of work isn't because things are awful in our water and wastewater systems. It's because our water systems are dynamic. We are productive, creative people in society that do a bunch of really cool things. And sometimes those things create what I'd call spillover effects. And some of those spillover effects are literally chemicals that go into our waterways. And so it's really important to have the regulatory bodies in place that ensure that when you're drinking that water, it's clean and safe. Some of the work that we did when I was the acting system administrator included a variety of rules on the drinking water side as well as on the wastewater side. On the wastewater side, we instituted a rule that affected coal-fired power plants that ensured that actually there would be no discharge from certain wastewaters from coal-fired power plants, and that there would be reduced discharges in terms of pollutants from those wastewater treatment plants at coal-fired power plants. That's on the wastewater side. Did a great deal of work over the past 20 years on combined sewer overflow issues. But on the drinking water side, we accomplished some amazing things. One was the lead and copper rule improvements rule. It's a really remarkable rule which will require the vast majority of communities around the country to replace their lead service lines within 10 years. A second is consumer confidence reports on the drinking water side. We adjusted that rule. It's a good rule. it allows for people in our communities to understand what the quality of their drinking water is. It's usually delivered, a report is delivered to everyone's house once a year. We increase that to twice a year. And that means that people will be more informed about their drinking water. And when I say more informed, I think that generally speaking, our drinking water gets less credit than it deserves. It's really good. And it's better and cheaper than the water that you go buy at the store, even if you find the cheapest gallon jugs of water at the grocery store. So it's really good that we are working and requiring communities to report on the quality of their water. And then the third thing we worked on was the PFAS rulemaking. People seem to be increasingly aware of these chemical compounds that are known as forever chemicals. And those chemical compounds are in so much of what we do. It's in the jacket you wear when you wear a raincoat. It's in the popcorn bag that you throw into the microwave to pop your popcorn, and it's in our drinking water. Not everywhere, and at different levels. So the the PFAS rule will require communities to sample to determine whether there are PFAS chemicals in their water, and then if so, at certain levels, to remove that through either putting in place new technologies or drilling new wells or shutting down the wells that have these chemical contaminants in them. And why is that important? Because these chemical contaminants are carcinogenic. And nobody wants cancer-causing chemicals in their drinking water. So those are three big accomplishments, and we did plenty of other work, but I think
Yes.
it's good to highlight those.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so Bruno, we've had Kelly Deering Smith on the podcast, who's the VP of Brand and Communications for Louisville Water. And I just want to point out for folks listening, like the CCR is a regulatory requirement, but back to, if you've not listened to Kelly's pod, she gave the first thing that a water system should do is know their water story and tell that story. And this CCR it's a requirement, but it's actually a really good forcing function and vehicle for water systems to take that, what they already have to be doing, and wrapping their story around it. Because to your point, Bruno, we've talked about this, we've talked about that. Like we've got a branding and communication issue, but we also have this regulatory requirement that it could be so simple to wrap your water story around it, right?
Yeah.
And use that as a catalyst to tell your story and make water visible.
I think that's one of the things that I appreciate so much about the work that you did, was that each of those regulations provided guidance and necessity to be more transparent. So it always sat on the good section of, how do you make this publicly available? How do you inform? And so kind of provided, hey, here's the bare minimum of what needs to be communicated, and how do we make it accessible, which ultimately helps to build the trust within the product of water that utilities create.
Boy, Isaac, that's such a good point. And I can't tell you how much I think that's absolutely right. Whether you look at the consumer confidence reports or the PFAS regulation, and especially the lead and copper rule, a big chunk of those rules ensures that the public is aware of what's going on. For example, in the lead and copper rule, you mentioned the public, if there's a sample result that exceeds the action level, every resident that has such an exceedance will find out about it and will be notified by the community. On top of that, you layer on the consumer confidence report. And if a utility is smart, as you said, Megan, they are wrapping their story of water around those reports. It really helps to, I think, build confidence in water systems, because I think in some ways, some inadvertently, some things through the marketing of water by companies that is bottled water sort of undermined what people think of the water, because, well, it must be better because it's mountain spring water than the tap water I'm drinking. It's not true, but these rules are designed to ensure that the public is aware of what's going on in all three of them. So that's such a good comment. Thank you.
Yeah. So while we're on the subject of rules, I mean, I think we can generally, if you're a human being, like not rules, there's a limit, right? No matter what side you sit on that fence. But my opinion, being an outsider coming into water and water embracing me, is sometimes in industries that where innovation isn't inherent to their core, sometimes you need a rulemaking process and rules to force change, to force innovation. And I think, the LCRI, say what you will, creating those digital inventories was a forcing function for utilities to get out of the filing cabinet, to get out of old ways of doing business, and say, okay, for the first time, I'm going to digitize my assets, or this subset of my assets, so that I can make better decisions that improve public health and capital decisions and where I spend my money and so on and so forth. So I think such good progress, Bruno. And now we have a new administration coming in, and they have new priorities, and they have, new priorities, new agenda, new budgets.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, let's get out our crystal ball. What do you think is going to happen? What's going to stay the same? What's going to change? And how do we need to be thinking differently with this new administration while continuing to make change? That's so important.
Well, first, before I do talk about that, I want to acknowledge your comment at the beginning about, regulations. Regulations actually can help create markets. And that is something you learn in this whole thing. You can see it happen.
Yeah.
And I think the LCRI is one of those areas where there's a requirement. The federal government does not tell systems how they inventory their systems, but they say you must do it. And that leaves a door open for companies like 120 Water to come in and help them do it in the most efficient way. So it creates a space for players in different areas to provide services to the wastewater and in this case drinking water systems that really makes a huge difference for them. So that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And boy, we've seen it. So lead and copper rule is one area. The second area, the PFAS rulemaking, there you see laboratories expanding their capabilities and growing their capabilities so that they can analyze sample results regarding PFAS for systems. So it's absolutely correct. So in terms of the crystal ball, and what are we seeing now, both in terms of PFAS and lead and copper? First, on PFAS, I think it's a little more clearer. PFAS, the administration has come out and said, look, we're going to keep the PFOA and PFAS chemical compounds regulated, and we're going to keep the regulation at 4 parts per trillion. There were 4 other chemical compounds that were regulated, and they were done in 2 ways. Individually, they were regulated, but also there was a thing called the hazard index. I won't go into exactly what it was, but it was another thing. And this administration said it wasn't promulgated properly. And so they're going to reconsider that. What they do with that, I don't know. They could do any number of things, but there will be some change to the PFAS rule. I can see that this administration's determined to do something while keeping the specific limits for PFOA and PFAS in place. On the lead and copper rule improvements, it's my understanding that the Office of Water has been taking time to consider options, but also recently briefed the administrator in terms of what options are available to make changes to the rule. And it's my understanding that perhaps the administrator has an idea of what he'd like to do, but he needs to consult with the Office of Management Budget and other areas before making a determination. So if I'm thinking about, well, what options would be available under the lead and copper rule improvements, I know some people would wish you just wouldn't have to replace all your lead service lines, period. I don't anticipate that is what this administrator will do. I don't have any insight that he is solidly decided to still require lead service line replacement, he could do any number of things that still require lead service line replacement. One is to give communities longer time frames, either to conduct their inventories or to conduct their replacement activities. Another is to just limit those changes to the kinds of changes that would allow the big communities. I think of Chicago. I think about St. Louis, which has a huge proportion of lead service lines, the total number of lead service lines. Maybe he would view the timeframes that have been created under the lead and copper rule improvements for those big systems to be too aggressive, and maybe he would order a reconsideration of exactly how long a community that has a high proportion of lead service lines would have to replace the lead service lines. I could see that potentially, but I think that it would be hard for this administration to argue it's a bad thing to replace all our lead service lines, or oh well, we don't need to do it for 100 years, or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And it's clear to me that we have evidence that communities around this country can replace their lead service lines in 10 years. We have seen it
Yeah.
in place. We've seen it in Pittsburgh, in New Jersey. Oh, Detroit is on track to get theirs done within 10 years. Big communities with a large number
Yeah.
can do it, and they're planning to do it. And I think the inventories are a hugely important place to start, for two reasons. One is if you have a high proportion of lead service lines, there's a baseline inventory that's due in 2027. Whatever that baseline inventory says you get in terms of time frame is what you will get for implementing the rule. So it pays for communities to do as much work as they can to get those inventories in shape now, so that they know, and if they need more time to replace those lead service lines, that they could get in. I think the inventorying process makes a great deal of sense to me. I don't know that will change unless it's just given more time. But I think that the replacement, the time frames for the replacement could be adjusted in a way that wouldn't make people object too much, and would help to spread the cost burden over a longer period of time, and maybe help to understand what's possible for those communities. So yeah.
It's fascinating to me that how much great collaboration there was between the EPA and Congress under the lead and copper rule improvements to also have the Infrastructure and Jobs Act to not only create a mandate, but also create funding. And so one of the things that I also see happening when I look out in the future is we have tariffs, the price of copper is going up, those kind of things. So how are utilities, what are those challenges going to be across the nation as we think about the cost of implementing these programs?
Yeah, that's a fundamental question, Isaac, that it is key for communities. How are we going to deal with these costs, which highlights the importance of the funding programs that exist within EPA right now. And there are a couple funding programs which exist. The bipartisan infrastructure law, as you mentioned, provided $50 billion of funding for water and wastewater systems. For water systems, it had specific funding for lead and copper rule replacement and PFAS work. And the concern I've got about this is that, so first of all, it's fundamental in order for communities to make improvements such as replacing those lead service lines. But also on the budget side of things, it's I'm very worried that Congress is going to make cuts to the state revolving fund program capitalization grants that go to states to help communities to do this. Um, I, I certainly understand the desire to tweak the regulations in this way or that way, but not providing funding for these activities is hugely damaging. Without the funding, it'll just be hard for communities. And I think communities understand it, have been working pretty hard through the associations and organizations that represent them to lobby Congress. So far, I'm still seeing seeing that several people in Congress are looking to cut the state revolving fund programs and significantly. I think it's a mistake. It's a huge mistake. Regardless of the administration, these are basic infrastructure programs. They should be funded. Whether it's meeting the PFAS rule, lead and copper rule, or just increasing their plant size, communities need this money. So that's the answer. The other thing is that there's some good news out there. The Water Infrastructure Financing Authority, otherwise known as WIFIA, provides great money to communities directly to communities for improvements to their water systems as well as their wastewater systems. And communities across the country are taking advantage of this great funding source. It's in addition to the state revolving fund program. It provides up to 49% of the costs and can be matched with SRF dollars to help communities put in place these improvements to their water systems.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to pull a thread that you brought up, and this is my soapbox too. I think it's short-sighted on a number of fronts, and especially the economic development front, because Bruno, you hit the nail on the head. These regulations create jobs, they create industries, and there's no more local jobs than replacing pipes in your community.
Yeah.
And so I think, we got to figure out a way to tie back what's the ROI to a community on these projects, and then maybe Congress will wake up and say, this isn't that you aren't funding water that you can't see. What you're funding is actually a sustainable job for someone in your community for 10 years, right? Mm-hmm. Or whatever the case may be. But that we're missing all of the benefits of why fund these programs to the extent we can, in my opinion.
And to the extent that water, as in our conversation, the episode with Kelly Deering-Smith, is a driver of economic development. Water is a baseline infrastructure so that someone can have a bakery.
Yep.
So we can, your fire, like whatever, whether it's a public service or the way that people use water for industry, agriculture, beyond just what. Yeah, it's an economic driver. Yeah.
Absolutely so. I mean, that's true. If you want to build a new industrial park out on the edge of town, you've got to provide water and sewer service to that. And that then helps the community draw businesses to their area.
Yeah.
It's absolutely an economic development tool. And then, as you said, Megan, it's not just you can bring new businesses to town, but when you hire locally to replace those lead service lines, and by that I mean local businesses to do that work, you create jobs.
That's right.
It is an economic driver. There's no doubt about it. Super important.
Okay, Bruno. Well, this is bring us home. You are a proponent of innovation in the water industry. And so let's put our big brain thinking cap on. 10 years from now, what do you think the 3 drivers of innovation that we should be focused on right now to get where we need to be in 10 years to adequately equip our water systems to meet the new regulatory demands, put the infrastructure demands, climate change, gray tsunami, all of those factors that we all know. Mm-hmm. What do you think we need to be doing now?
Well, there's so much, and so currently we're seeing issues like PFAS dominate the discussion because they're chemical compounds that people are aware of. Somewhere in the future, I think there will be an increasing awareness of plastics pollution and impact it has on our area. That the lead in 10 years, believe it or not, hopefully we'll be wrapping up the lead and copper rule for most of the communities around the country. Maybe not. Maybe it'll just be at the end, or there'll be a couple years left. I think that'll be super important. And then in terms of water quality, one of the big areas that we've been working on, but it's only growing importance, is nutrient pollutions in our waters, because it affects our drinking water systems.
That's right. Yeah.
In 2014, the city of Toledo, Ohio, shut down its drinking water intake and couldn't provide water to residents. Why? Because of nutrient loadings within in Lake Erie. So tackling that will be a really big issue. It's still an issue, and it's issue in several places, including the Gulf of Mexico, in Iowa, in Lake Erie, and in rivers, creeks, and streams all around the country. So plastics is one big area that I think we'll see more and more activity over. I think we'll know more about PFAS stuff, and there may be more requests for regulation of specific chemical PFAS compounds. And then, we'll have to deal with other issues that we can't even imagine right now that'll be coming up. The most important thing for communities is to ensure that their system is up to date and is able to meet our requirements today, and that there are pollution control activities or contaminant control technologies that can be put in place to help reduce that problems on all of those fronts, the ones that have an effect in several areas. I think about our lead and copper rule, or our PFAS rule. Lead and copper rule are taking out all sorts of issues with lead, but we're also ensuring that the water is delivered safely, it's not lost in a way to systems. And then on PFAS, and if you put in place technologies that replace or eliminate the PFAS, you're also helping with a variety of other constituents.
Yeah.
So that's really good. The other thing I want to say is water scarcity is going to become a bigger issue, even in places like Indiana, where water seems to be all over the place. That there's an economic development series of activities going on up around Zionsville, and a tech corridor that folks in different places are seeking to put in. But water availability has been an issue there.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in on the east side of the state, when Honda wanted to put its auto factory in, there were water issues there. We'll see more of that. So I think water reuse and water scarcity issues will go hand in hand, and water reuse will be increasingly a tool that will be available for communities to ensure water. And the big thing, what's happening now, AI.
Yes.
And-
Oh.
Right?
Yes.
And with
Data
AI,
centers.
this data centers take up a ton of water. What's the right way to do that? They're proposing all over the place. One of the ways is water reuse. Instead of just having one-time use of water and putting contaminants, and let's have them reuse it, put in place water reuse facilities. So those are some of the things I think it will become bigger and bigger. And, with the change in climate, I don't care what you call it, but clearly rain events are becoming more intense. They're becoming more frequent, but they're also interspersed with greater periods of drought. That's going to be an issue that we need to tackle, and we can tackle it in a variety of different ways. So I guess there's a long list of things that we'll be concerned about.
You led us off by saying, water is dynamic. And I think when we're ending and on that, proving that it's dynamic and it's going to be dynamic for decades to come. And I think that's why making sure that we have young talent and vehicles for young talent to continue to enter this industry, stay in this industry, and help focus on these things, not just now, but decade for now is a huge critical success factor to being able to tackle these things. So thank you for ending us on that front, truly.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. Young talent and the people that come into the workforce, whether it's coming to work at 120 Water, whether it's coming to work at EPA or other places, bring new, fresh ideas
Yeah.
and have fresh thoughts about things. And what I love is that mix of young talent and institutional knowledge and good seasoning, because boy, that is a powerful combination that helps us address these problems in ways that we couldn't even think of today.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to those young people solving all the problems.
I know. Well, thank you so much, Bruno. As always, it's a pleasure to speak with you and just go deep and philosophical, just all of the things, and cover so much ground. So it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, and it's great to join you guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for joining us for this week's conversation with Bruno Pigott. It's such a privilege to get to have conversations with such incredible folks who make water work. Please like, share, and follow this podcast. And we want to hear from you. Who do you want to hear from? We know that there's so many folks that you come in contact with who really make water work. And so thank you for your suggestions, and thank you for joining us. And we can't wait to see you next week on the Make Water Work podcast. Thanks for listening to the Make Water Work podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss a conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts and questions. Connect with us on LinkedIn or send us a message. Together, we can make water work for everyone.